Okay, I hope I am audible to all the students who are attending this lecture. We continue with the concept of monopoly today. And in the last lecture of monopoly, we were doing profit maximization under monopoly. We were doing profit maximization under monopoly. If all students can recall the diagram which we had made, my origin, quantity per period, price and costs are measured on the y-axis. Okay, this is the demand curve facing the monopolist, also called the average revenue curve. Then we have the marginal revenue curve or the MR curve. Then we have the marginal cost curve of the monopolist. And we had done the profit maximizing conditions. Okay, the profit maximizing conditions were as follows. So the profit maximizing conditions for a monopolist are as follows. First condition is that marginal revenue should exactly be equal to the marginal cost. And second condition is that the MC curve should cut the MR curve from below. The MC curve should cut the MR curve from below. Okay, so you can see MR is equal to MC at this point. So this is the quantity produced by the monopolist. This is the price charged by the monopolist, which is given by the demand curve. Okay, this is the price charged by the monopolist. MR curve will always lie below the AR curve. We had done this concept also. So this is just a recall from the previous lecture. We had done this, and then we had done the inverse elasticity rule also. So if all students can recall the inverse elasticity rule, we had derived it in the last lecture. The inverse elasticity rule was that P minus MC by P, which we call as the relative markup. P minus MC is called the absolute markup. P minus MC divided by P is called the relative markup. This is nothing but minus 1 upon EQP, where EQP denotes elasticity of demand. So we had done the observations also. So what does this mean? So the above equation implies that the gap between the price of the firm's output, the gap between the price of the firm's output and its marginal cost is inversely related to the price elasticity of demand. So we had discussed it in the previous lecture that more elastic the demand is, lower will be the relative markup. Less elastic the demand is, higher will be the relative markup. So I can say that my relative markup, which is P minus MC divided by P, shares an inverse relationship with price elasticity of demand. Then we had also made some observations regarding this. So if I just write this equation once again, P minus MC by P is equal to minus 1 upon EQP. We had made some observations where the first observation was that the monopolist will never operate on the inelastic portion. The monopolist will never operate on the inelastic portion. Inelastic portion means EQP greater than minus 1. Because on the inelastic portion, marginal revenue becomes negative and cannot be equated, with positive marginal cost. It cannot be equated with positive marginal cost. To see this, you can see the example. Remember your marginal revenue. So recall that total revenue is nothing but price as a function of quantity. I can write it like this. Total revenue is price as a function of quantity into quantity. So therefore, marginal revenue is, if I differentiate using product rule, so this is my marginal revenue, which I can write it like this. I can take P common. So 1 plus Q by P times dP by dQ, which I can write as P times 1 plus 1 upon E. So if demand curve is inelastic, say E is equal to minus half, then my marginal revenue will be P into 1 plus 1 upon minus half, which is P into 1 minus 2, which is minus P, which is less than 0. So you can see that your marginal revenue has become negative. So therefore, what we learn from first observation is a monopolist will always operate on the elastic portion of the demand curve. A monopolist will always operate on the elastic portion of the demand curve. We had understood this reason mathematically, we have understood this logically also. All of us know that if the monopolist plans to sell more output, that is possible only by reducing the price. Now, if the demand is elastic, then a small fall in price will increase quantity demanded by a larger amount. If the demand is elastic or highly responsive, a fall in price will increase the demand by a larger amount, which will cause the total revenue of the monopolist to go up, because total revenue is nothing but price into quantity. But if the demand is inelastic, then a given fall in price will increase quantity demanded only by a tiny amount. If the demand is inelastic or not highly responsive, then when the price falls, demand faced by the monopolist will go up, but by a tiny amount, which will cause the total revenue to fall. So if you all can see, where will the monopolist operate? He will always operate on the elastic portion, because on the elastic portion of the demand curve, if he reduces the price, his total revenue will increase. Whereas on the inelastic portion of the demand curve, if he cuts or if he reduces the price, demand will increase only by a tiny amount, causing the total revenue to fall. So this is the first observation which we had learned in the last lecture, that monopolist will always operate on the elastic portion of the demand curve. The second observation which we had learned from this equation, I am writing it again. So this was our inverse elasticity rule, and observation 2 which we had learned was that the firm's markup over marginal cost varies inversely. It varies inversely with the elasticity of demand. So higher the elasticity of demand, it will imply lower will be the markup. Lower the markup over the marginal cost, and lower the elasticity of demand, or I can, since I am using EQP, let me use EQP only for consistency. Similarly, lower the EQP, higher the markup over the marginal cost. To understand this, we can take an example. If my EQP is -2, then P minus MC by P is equal to -1 upon -2, which implies P minus MC by P is equal to half, which implies 2P minus 2MC is equal to P, which implies P is equal to 2 times the marginal cost. Price is double the marginal cost. But if EQP is -10, even more elastic. -10 means even more elastic. Then P minus MC by P will be -1 upon -10, which will imply that P minus MC by P is equal to 1 upon 10, which will imply 10P minus 10MC is equal to P, which will imply 9P is equal to 10MC, which will imply now my price is only 1.1 times the marginal cost. So when EQP was -2, the price charged by the monopolist was double the marginal cost. When elasticity has gone up, now the price charged by the monopolist is only 1.1 times the marginal cost. That means your markup has gone down. So as EQP increases from 2 to 10, I am looking at the absolute value. I am ignoring the negative sign because elasticity of demand is negative, because demand curve is downward sloping. So we don't have to do with the negative sign. Look at the absolute value. When EQP increases from 2 to 10, markup falls. The markup over the marginal cost falls. So I hope all the students have understood this. Then there is a very important note which we need to understand. So let's write this note. Let's write this note. If the elasticity of demand EQP is constant along the entire demand curve, if EQP is constant along the entire demand curve, okay, then the proportional markup, over the marginal cost would remain unchanged. In response to the changes in the input costs. What does this line mean? This line is saying that if elasticity of demand is constant along the demand curve, then the proportional markup over the marginal cost would remain unchanged in response to input costs. This simply means that, so I can say this means that an increase in marginal cost will cause the monopolist, to increase its prices proportionately. And a fall in marginal cost will cause the monopolist to reduce its price proportionately. This is what is meant by this particular sentence, that if the elasticity of demand is constant along the demand curve, an increase in marginal cost will cause the monopolist to increase the price in the same proportion, and a fall in marginal cost will cause the monopolist to reduce its price in the same proportion. So a diagram would give a better explanation. So you can see that this is my quantity per period, this is my price and costs. This is my initial demand curve or the AR curve. This is my marginal revenue curve. Okay, suppose this is my initial marginal cost MC1. Initially the monopolist is producing where MR is equal to MC1 and the price charged by the monopolist is how much? PM star. Now suppose marginal cost increases from MC1 to MC2. What will happen to the marginal cost curve? For every level of quantity, my marginal cost curve will now shift vertically upwards. For every level of quantity, my marginal cost curve will shift vertically upwards. Where will the monopolist produce now? Where MR is equal to MC2. So you can see the monopolist will reduce its quantity QM dash and it will charge a higher price which is given by PM dash. So what do we learn? an increase in the marginal cost from MC1 to MC2 causes the monopolist to reduce its output from QM star to QM dash and increase its price from PM star to PM dash. So you can see an increase in marginal cost is causing the prices also to increase. Now, the thing to understand here is if elasticity of demand is a constant along the entire demand curve, this increase in price will cause the price also to increase by the same proportion. I repeat, if elasticity of demand is a constant along the entire demand curve, an increase in marginal cost will cause the price also to increase in the same proportion. We will understand this soon through a numerical. But before doing that, let's talk about monopoly profits now. So let's talk about monopoly profits. Okay, so let's look at the scenario. So case 1, when the price charged by the monopolist is more than the average cost. Case 2, when the price charged by the monopolist is exactly equal to the average cost. And case 3, when the price charged by the monopolist falls below the average cost. So let's draw the diagram for all these 3 cases. Origin, this is my quantity per period. This is my costs and price. Costs and price. Okay. So initial demand curve facing the monopolist. Marginal revenue curve. Marginal cost curve. Okay. Monopolist is producing where MR is equal to MC and charges a price given by the demand curve. Now suppose the price charged by the monopolist is more than the average cost. Suppose my average cost is somewhere here. Suppose this is my average cost. All of us know that the average cost curve is U-shaped. This is my AC curve. You can see what is my total cost. So if I label this as C star, this is my C star. Okay. So my total revenue is area. Suppose I label this as E and suppose I label this point as F. So my total revenue is area OPM EQM. My total area is the area of rectangle OPM EQM. My total cost is the area OC star FQM That means this smaller rectangle is my total cost. So what is my profit? The monopolist is making supernormal profit in this case. Supernormal profit in this case equal to the area C star PM EF. So this is the area of supernormal profits. This is the area of supernormal profits. So when the price charged by the monopolist lies above the average cost, the monopolist is making supernormal profits. Then let's look at this case. Let's look at the second case. So this is my initial demand. This is my marginal revenue. This is my marginal cost. Monopolist produces where MR is equal to MC. Price charged by the monopolist is given by the demand curve. Now suppose my average cost curve is like this. Suppose this is my average cost curve. You can see in all the diagrams MC cuts AC at its minimum. You can see that the marginal cost curve is cutting the average cost curve at its minimum. And you can see that in this particular diagram, my total revenue is the area OPMEQM, and my total cost is also the same area OPMEQM, because in this case my price is equal to the average cost C star. In the second diagram, my PM star is exactly equal to the average cost. So my total revenue and total cost have the same area. Therefore, profit of the monopolist in this case is 0. Or I can say the monopolist breaks even. Profit of the monopolist is 0 or the monopolist breaks even. And let's look at the last case where the price charged by the monopolist falls short of the average cost. So quantity, price, this is my demand curve, this is the marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve. The monopolist will produce where MR is equal to MC. This is the price the monopolist will charge. Suppose my average cost curve lies here. So you can see that now the monopolist is making losses. So if this is my E and this is my point F, then total revenue of the monopolist is area OPMFQM. Total cost of the monopolist is area OC star EQM. And you can see the monopolist is making losses. The monopolist is making losses. So the loss of the monopolist is equal to the area. It is equal to the area PM C star EF. So will the monopolist operate in this case? So in the third case and in the second case, the monopolist will not operate. When will the monopolist operate? The monopolist will operate only in the first case when it earns supernormal profits. Okay, so what the point to understand here is conclusion. in the long run, the monopolist will operate only when the price charged by the monopolist exceeds the average cost. And in the long run, the monopolist will make supernormal profits, also called as monopoly rent. Supernormal profit is also called as monopoly rent. So monopolist will operate in the long run only when the monopolist is making supernormal profits. Otherwise, the monopolist will not operate. The monopolist will not operate to break even or to make losses. Monopolist will operate only to make supernormal profits. So now the next question which comes in our mind, do we have the monopoly supply curve? This is the next question which comes in our mind. So does monopoly supply curve exist? Does a monopoly supply curve exist? Answer is that there is no monopoly supply curve. There is no monopoly supply curve. If all students can recall, when we had done the introductory microeconomics course, we had said that in case of perfect competition, the supply curve of the firm is the marginal cost curve over and above the average variable cost curve. In the introductory micro course, in case of perfect competition, the supply curve of the firm is the marginal cost curve over and above the average variable cost curve. If all students can recall the introductory micro course. But in case of monopoly, there will be no monopoly supply curve. So I can say the supply curve for a monopoly will be only 1 point. The supply curve of the monopoly will be only 1 point, that is the price quantity combination, at which MR is equal to MC. Okay, so the monopolist will simply supply what is demanded, and what will be demanded? That quantity will be demanded at which MR is equal to MC. So I can say, does a monopolist does not have a well-defined supply curve. A monopolist does not have a well-defined supply curve. So even if the demand curve shifts, suppose the demand increases, a new price quantity combination will be chosen and that will be supplied. So if I talk about monopoly supply curve, there is no proper well-defined supply curve. Monopoly supply curve are just points. Monopoly supply curve are just points corresponding to the price quantity combinations at which MR is equal to MC. In other words, guys, what we need to understand here is that a monopolist will simply supply what is demanded. So there is no supply condition in the case of a monopoly, and there is no particular supply curve in the case of a monopoly. The monopolist will simply supply that quantity at which MR is equal to MC. Okay, so now let us do a numerical on profit maximization of the monopolist. So let's do a numerical. Let's look at a practice question. Suppose the market for Olympic quality frisbees, suppose the market for Olympic quality frisbees, which I denote by Q, has a linear demand curve, given by Q is equal to 2000 minus 20p, and the costs of the monopoly frisbee producer, is C of Q, which is 0.05 Q square plus 10,000. The question asks us, find the optimum quantity and the price charged by the monopolist and the monopoly profits. Okay, so suppose the market for Olympic quality frisbees has a linear demand curve given by Q is equal to 2000 minus 20p, and the cost of the monopoly frisbee producer is C of Q, which is 0.05 Q square plus 10,000. We need to find the optimum quantity and the price charged by the monopolist. So how will we find the optimum quantity? We will use the condition MR equal to MC, but to find out MR, we need to find out total revenue TR first. So we are given that our Q is equal to 2000 minus 20p. So first we will write price in terms of quantity. So this implies 20p is equal to 2000 minus Q, because ultimately we have to convert everything in terms of Q. Because when I had started with the lecture on monopoly, we had discussed that monopoly has control either over price or over quantity, not both. And we had assumed that in this chapter, we will assume that the monopolist will choose quantity. And based on that, the price will be decided, given by the demand curve. So we are deciding upon the quantity. So we are converting everything in terms of quantity first. So it implies my price is nothing but 2000 minus Q by 20, which is 100 minus Q by 20. So this is my price. Therefore, my total revenue will be P into Q. So my P is nothing but 100 minus Q by 20 times Q. So it is 100 Q minus Q square by 20. Now, what will marginal revenue be? If I differentiate the total revenue with respect to Q, I get the marginal revenue. This is 100 minus 2Q by 20, which is equal to 100 minus Q by 10. This is my marginal revenue. Now, how will I find the marginal cost? In the question, I am given that my total cost function is 0.05 Q square plus 10,000. Therefore, my marginal cost will be DC by DQ, which will be 0.05 times 2Q. I differentiated with respect to Q, so I get 0.05 times 2Q, which is nothing but 0.1 times Q. Now, at the profit maximizing level, MR is equal to MC. So MR is 100 minus Q by 10 is equal to MC, which is 0.1 Q. So which implies 100 is equal to Q by 10 plus 0.1 times Q, which implies 100 is equal to Q plus 10 into 0.1 is 1. So this will be 1000 is equal to 2Q, which implies quantity produced by the monopolist is 500. Once we have got the quantity, we put it in the demand equation. This is my demand equation. So therefore, or I can put it here also. This is my price. So price charged by the monopolist will be 100 minus QM by 20, which is 100 minus 500 by 20, which will be 100 minus 25, which is 75. This will be the price charged by the monopolist. So quantity produced by the monopolist is 500 units. Price charged by the monopolist is 75. Whatever units are given to you, be it dollars or rupees or any other units. Okay. And what will be the quantity profit of the monopolist? So profit of the monopolist will be total revenue minus total cost. Now, what is the total revenue? This is my total revenue. So I can write total revenue is nothing but 100Q minus Q square by 20. Put Q as 500 here. So this will be 100 into 500 minus 500 square divided by 20. So my total revenue will come out as how much? So this will be 5. This will be 50,000 minus 500 square divided by 20. 12,500. So my total revenue of the monopolist has come out as 37,500. Total revenue of the monopolist 37,500. What will be the total cost of the monopolist? Total cost is 0.05 Q square. Q is how much? 500 plus 10,000. So therefore, if we calculate the total cost further, so 500 square into 0.05 is 12,500 plus 10,000. So this comes out as 22,500. So therefore, I can say profit of the monopolist is total revenue, which is 37,500 minus the total cost, which is 22,500, which is how much? So 37,500 minus 22,500 gives us 15,000. So for this question, quantity produced by the monopolist is 500 units, price charged by the monopolist is 75 units, and the profit of the monopolist is 15,000. So I hope all students have understood this numerical. Okay, so this is where I stop in the lecture today. I hope all students have enjoyed the lecture. Any doubt, you can unmute your mic and ask, or you can call me, or you can mail me your doubts at divineschoolofeconomics@gmail.com. So this is where I stop. We will continue from the same topic in the next lecture.